Okay, let's Shift Command N and create a stereo instrument track, and let's insert multi-channel instrument battery 4. Okay, so on the left we have the library. We can have samples or kit selected, so we've got a variety of kits here: acoustic, analog, digital, urban, vinyl, percussion kits, as well as a sound effects kit. So we just start with kits. Let's pick a digital kit, and let's just double click to load the kit. So now we've got all of these samples placed in all of these cells within battery. So if we click on the first A1 cell, we can see that this is mapped to C1 MIDI note. So we can trigger this note in the MIDI editor. So battery doesn't come with a pattern sequencer, so we do have to trigger within the editor. So let's go down to C1. We can see that as they move along through A, they're mapped C1 onwards. So you can easily create a beat through some programming. So let's just start programming some sounds. Okay, so that's a very simple way of creating a drum beat. So what we'll do, we'll start a new kit and just say, yeah, we want to get rid of all of those samples. So if we go into samples, we get access to all of the samples within the library, and there's literally thousands and thousands of hits. So you can just see there open hi-hats, percussion, ride cymbals, shakers. So really, in terms of building a custom kit, we start with, say, a kick drum. So we go down to the kicks. We can. So these are obviously beatbox sounds. So we can just use the arrow key to audition the various kicks. So find one you like, drag it into the cell. That's mapped to C1. We could go down now to snares. So let's go down to S and find a snare. So that's quite a fizzy snare there. So that's now mapped to C1. Then we could go and find some hi-hats. So we'll do an open hat. Where is it? Oh, it went way past it. Okay, so open hi-hat. Quite like the sound of that. Could go for a closed hi-hat. Quite like the sound of that. So let's move those around just so that they. So again, you could fill all of these cells and even add more cells. So let's just start here. Again, we could get rid of this. make a pattern. So it's looping round. Okay, so we've got a basic pattern going on there. So let's now look at some of the other features within Battery. So we've got a main window here, which we've got access to a volume envelope, pitch envelope. We've got some access to how velocity works with the sounds. We've got a sample engine or a time stretch engine, which will allow us to stretch out the sounds. We've got a filter, compressor, and some sends, which are going to some effects in the master tab. So reverb, delay. So if we go back to the main, so let's look at the pitch envelope. So we can modify these sounds. So let's start with this fizzy snare sound. If we go to the pitch envelope and turn it on, we can actually start to modify how the pitch changes over time. So we can have a bit more decay, we can really push it high. So if we have a listen now, so we've modified this snare sound in some kind of way. Okay, so let's look at the editor. So the editor page allows us to make edits to the waveform and also do things like create loops within the waveform so we can get some interesting effects. So let's start with this open hi-hat sound. If we go into the edit tab, click on the waveform, we get an edit range, and within this range we can do things like copy and paste, we can reverse. So let's just make some copies, or let's just duplicate. So we can duplicate to make that sample much longer. So now if we go into the loop window and click, well, there's already a loop set up, but we can, if there's not, we can click add loop, and then what we can do, we can set a point within the waveform at which the sample will loop, and then when we release the key it will continue to play. So let's press and hold this pad and then let go. So there's a lot of scope for sound design and to customize some of these sounds. So if we go back into the main window and we apply some pitch envelope to this, so let's turn it on, let's see what we can do. So let's increase the decay. So we've got some really interesting effects going on there. So obviously this is just playing back the initial start of that. Oh yeah, so this will pop up every time we make an edit to a piece of audio. So this is just saying we should really save the sample. We want to save it, so I recommend that you do save it within the folder within your session folder. So I've got rhythm production here. I could create a folder within this called battery edits create, and I'm going to choose that file, and that sample will now be saved. Okay, so what else can we do? We've got we can go to this kick drum. If we go back into the main window, we can actually do some time stretching on it. So let's select the time stretch. Let's really stretch it out. So we've lengthened it. So again, we can play around with some of these features. That's maybe a bit too much. Or we can shorten it. So again, a lot of scope for manipulating these sounds. We've also got a filter, so we can roll off some of the top end of this closed hi-hat, for example. And we've got a compressor and some send. So if we turn up the send on this hi-hat, you should hear a delay. And this effect is on the master tab. So this is a global effect. So we have sends on each of these different hits. So we could have some reverb on this open hi-hat, which we've done some pitch modulation on. Okay, so in terms of modulation, click on the modulation tab, we've got an option, and we've got some modulation slots. So if we pick a low frequency oscillator and apply that to the cutoff of a filter, if we go into the effects and turn on the filter, let's set it a little bit lower and give it some resonance. So this effect is now oscillating based on the effect, based on the rate of the LFO in the modulation tab. So if we go to LFO 1 here, which is modulating the cutoff, if we set the sync to 16th notes, it's going to trigger in 16th notes. Let's increase the rate. Okay, so just interesting ways of modulating the sound. What else have we got? So we've got some global effects within which will apply to everything. So by default, in each of these tabs, they each have an effect, their own effect chain. You can see the open hi-hat has the filter on it. If we go back to the closed hi-hat, the filter isn't on. So they have dedicated effects for each clip, but then you can have global effects if you so choose. Okay, so what we'll do now, let's look at importing some samples into Battery. So if I just go into Pro Tools, I'm going to go into the clip list where I've got a hip hop loop. So this isn't in time with the session. All I'm going to do is highlight it. I'm going to go separate clips, transients. I'm going to hit OK, and that's going to create a lot of individual clips. So it's essentially separated all those drum hits out. So if I right click on those in the clip list and go and select export clip as files, interleaves fine, so it's going to put it in a audio files folder. I'm going to put it in a folder called so I'm going to go to my folder, so rhythm production. I'm going to create a new folder within there and call it drum samples. Great. Open that, and I'm going to export those samples. So now what I can do, if I go back to Battery and I open my Finder and I go to rhythm production, drum samples, I can then drag and drop these straight into Battery, and these are now able to be reprogrammed via the MIDI keyboard. So you can see that B1 is assigned to C2 and on it goes. So let's just say we wanted to pitch this snare, have it so we could transpose it across an octave. Let's hold Alt and copy it into, I've just copied it into D4, cell D4. If we change the range from, say, D sharp 4 to say B4, Now if we go into the MIDI editor, so let's just scroll up to D sharp 4. Okay, so the samples are mapped across the range. However, you hear they're not actually changing pitch. To change the pitch, we need to go into setup, select key track, which will map essentially map it to the pitches of the keyboard. So now we can have some variation of the sample in terms of its pitch. Okay, so hopefully that is a brief but useful introduction to Native Instruments Battery 4.